Want to welcome you all here tonight. I guess for this type of class, this is a pretty good audience here, and I hope everybody at home also has a good view of this. And so tonight we're looking at a little bit different than what we've had in the past few weeks, and we're looking at the Bible and archaeology. And we'll go through a number of events, a number of people, and look at the archaeology and the evidence that the Bible is real, and that the people and the places are real, and the events really happen. But before we begin, let's have a prayer. Father, we thank you for all the things that you've done. We thank you for your grace and mercy and your love for us, that you sent your Son to die on the cross, that we can have our sins forgiven. We thank you for your love and all the things that you've given us. We ask that you be with us tonight as we study your word and we study more about you and learn that you are the true light and the true God for all of us. We ask you that you be with us through our lives. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Okay, so archaeology has been around for a long time. There's been a lot of people, need to stay over here. There's been a lot of people that have looked at the archaeology record, especially connected with the Bible. And one of the things you will see on the internet, on the TV, or wherever you look at media, people will actually, a lot of times I've seen where people will say, the Bible is just absolutely false. There is nothing true in the Bible whatsoever. And so it's just a fable, it's just a book of fiction, and you can't rely on anything it says. Well, tonight we're going to be looking at evidence to show that in archaeology, we see a lot of evidence, and this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. We'll see a lot of evidence that the Bible is true, that the events that happen are true. And so we'll start going through here and seeing the different events. Okay, the first one is Moses. And so we go to Exodus 2, 1 through 10. Now there was a man of the house of Levi, went and married a daughter of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket and covered him over with tar and pitch. And then she put the child into it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to find out what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the Nile with her maidens alongside the Nile. And she saw that the basket was among the reeds and sent a maid, and she brought it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the child was crying, and she had pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then the sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women that she may nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go ahead, go." And so the girl went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse her for me, and I'll give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. The child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, and said, "Because I drew him out of the water." You notice that I highlighted the term daughter of Pharaoh. For a long time, that always I was always kind of thinking, well, how many daughters of Pharaoh could there be? Literally, a whole lot of them. The pharaohs were polygamous, and I'm sure they had a lot of children, and they had, sure, a lot of daughters. And so, this story, I was always worried about or concerned that the story didn't have a lot of substance to it. However, I kind of started studying archaeology a few years ago, just kind of on a habit. And one of the things I found out about that term is that I thought he was just one of the many daughters of the current Pharaoh. However, the daughter of Pharaoh in the monuments and all the stuff that they put up for people to see, there are only 4 mentions of the daughter of Pharaoh in all of Egypt. So this was a special term. And God had it right. When he told Moses to write this book, he had it right because this was a daughter of Pharaoh. Okay, who was she? No, I'm not good at pronouncing these names. Hatshepsut. So I'm going to try to call her Hattie instead. So, I'm not an expert in this, but and I'm not a good speaker anyway. So, during Moses' life, there was one daughter of Pharaoh, Hattie, that was called the daughter of Pharaoh. And she was the daughter of Pharaoh at the moment that she found Moses. A lot of people speculate that she was about 12 to 14 years old when she found Moses. And so Moses came to live with her when he was about 4 years old. And of course, the way she talked about it and the way it looked is that she must have taken Moses in and treated him just like it was her own flesh and blood. And he grew up like an Egyptian, a royal Egyptian. And so he got all of the training, all of the connections. He understood how the government worked, how the society worked. He rubbed shoulders with the powerful people. And because he was considered the son of Hattie, he was one of the powerful people in Egypt. And people would come and do his bidding and revered him and respected him. He was probably a very powerful person in the palace because of his connection to Hattie. So as we go along, her husband, who turned out to be Moses, the second, dies, and he has a very young son, about 1 or 2 years old at most. Now, this is not Hattie's child, because evidently she only had 1 or 2 daughters, that she had trouble bearing children. But she was the first wife of Pharaoh, so she was the most powerful wife at all. So, Thutmose dies, leaves the infant son, Thutmose III, I guess that's like a junior, to be Pharaoh. So who becomes regent? Who raises the child? Well, again, you come back to the daughter of Pharaoh. Somebody that has a lot of influence and a lot of power, and that's Hattie. And Hattie comes along and becomes regent. And for several years, they estimate about 2-3 years, she is just the regent. And she looks over and takes care of Tut III and makes sure he's coming up well. But then she gets a taste of power, and she decides to become Pharaoh herself. So she starts taking on the title and the dress and the actions of a Pharaoh. And so she rules about 20 to 30 years as a Pharaoh. And Thutmose III grows up with her, and as he gets older, she actually shares the power with him. And when he gets into his late teens and early 20s, he actually becomes in charge of the army. And so he goes off and carries out campaigns up in the land of Canaan, out in the Sinai Peninsula, and a number of other regions. And so he's running the army while she's back home running the country. During that time, Egypt was became very prosperous, very powerful. Their influence stretched to one of the farthest extents that was ever possible at that time. And then Thutmose became Pharaoh also in co-regent, so they call him both Pharaoh, and they treat him like Pharaoh. In fact, some of the later pictures and statues of Hattie has her wearing a beard like the pharaohs wore. Now, those beards were false beards. That was a sign of power in Egyptian culture in Egyptian hierarchy. And so the Pharaoh wore a false beard to show that he was the power, and both Tutmosis III and Hattie would sit there when they held court. Both of them were wearing the beard that kind of came out. They're kind of a long beard that kind of stick out about that big around. And they wore that to show them that they were Pharaoh. Well, of course, eventually, Hattie gets old, Hattie dies, and Tutmosis III peacefully comes in and becomes the sole Pharaoh. Everybody seems to think that the rule between Hattie and Tutmosis III was very smooth. Everything went very well, and it seemed to go okay. This is a picture of Hattie, kind of the early times, but the headdress is that of a pharaoh, and the dress that she has on, how she's dressed, is where it's claimed to be that she's pharaoh. So Moses, so they estimate that. Let's see, did I? Okay, so sometime in there, Moses grows up, and he knows he's Jewish. I mean, he knows he's a Hebrew, an Israelite, and he sees the people of Israel being treated badly. And so one time he sees somebody mistreating one of the Israelites, and he steps in and kills the Egyptian. And quickly they find out about it. And so some people speculate that may have been good for Moses in that, in a way that if Moses had stayed after Hattie had died, with the relationship he had with Hattie, he may have been endangered by Tutmosis III, because here's this son of Hattie here that is not under control of Hattie anymore because she has died. And so it's probably a good thing that Moses was forced to leave. And so Tutmosis III became Pharaoh and ruled for about 30 years. And Moses was literally pushed out of Egypt, and he wanders into the Sinai Peninsula. So, looking at the times and dates, many scholars now believe that the Exodus happened in the year 1446 BC. Now, if you watch the movies about the Exodus, you'll always see Ramses as the Pharaoh. Well, Ramses is about 150 to 200 years later, and the reason the movies always show Ramses is that back in the 1930s and 40s, everybody thought that Ramses was the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus. Well, there's been a whole lot more study since then, and they've figured out that it wasn't Ramses who lived at about 1200, but it was Tutmosis II and the third around 1446. So Tutmosis III dies, and his son comes in, and so God sends Moses back to Egypt. Well, now, all the things he learned about Egypt, the government, the society, the language, and all that kind of stuff about Egypt comes to his advantage. God prepared him well, but also had him leave Egypt so he could be protected, and that people would kind of forget him to some extent, but not enough so that Moses could come back in and find an easy way to get access to the Pharaoh. That's one thing I always wondered about. It says, how could a sheep herder, even though he probably spoke pretty good Egyptian, come in and get an audience with Pharaoh? Well, he comes back as being the son of a former Pharaoh and one of the most powerful people, not just women, but one of the most powerful people that have ever lived in Egypt. And there's probably people that remember him, that liked him, and so they welcome him in, and they grease the skids and allow him to go before Pharaoh. And so then we know the rest of the story about how he talks to Pharaoh and how we go through the plagues and all of that stuff. So that allowed him to gain influence and an audience with the Pharaoh. And so that facilitated the way that Moses could get in and start the process of bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. Now, about 10 years after the Exodus, and the Israelites are in the Sinai Desert, and they're sitting there waiting their 40 years that was imposed on them for their unbelief. And some of the, at that time, about 10 years after the actual Exodus out of Egypt, archaeologists have found that there was a concerted effort to erase Hattie's name from history. And some people, and they did a fairly good job, because her name is just kind of starting to come out about the last few years, and they're starting to realize the contributions she had to Egypt in terms of prosperity, economics, government, and all that kind of stuff, and that she was considered, she is now starting to be considered as one of the truly great pharaohs of Egypt, a woman. And so I think some people, I can see the Egyptians back then saying, man, I can't have her overshadowing me in all the accomplishments. And so they kind of erased her name out. And some of the pharaohs after that start putting their name in to the accomplishments that she did. And so she's just starting to come in for the last few years. And her name is now being mentioned in a lot of journals and places like that, and giving her credit for a lot of the prosperity that Egypt had during that time. So now to the next one, another archaeological find that helps prove the Bible. This particular motif is built by Amenhotep III. It dates to around 1400 to 1390 BC. This happens to be right after the time that Israel moves into Canaan and conquers it. By this time, by about 1400, they are considered pretty well settled into the country of Canaan, and they've portioned out the land, and they're living pretty peacefully. Well, Egypt being Egypt, they probably went back to their old habits, and they started every year, every spring, they would send some kind of expedition up into Canaan, or other places around there, to try to subjugate the people, to try to pillage and bring back riches, and a number of other things. And so Amenhotep III goes up there and evidently runs in and fights the Israelites in some shape, form, or fashion. And he comes back and says, I have vanquished the people of Yahweh. Well, that's very interesting, because this is the first time Yahweh, the name of God, is actually shown up in history. So we know back about 1400 BC, there was a God that's being worshipped called Yahweh. Now, the Egyptians didn't believe in him, but they knew that the people worshipped him, and they had a battle with him. Now the thing said that they vanquished the people of Yahweh. You have to remember these temples and these writings that they put on the wall were not like like somebody writing our history, where people would kind of go and research and try to put together what they think really happened, what the truth is, and present it to people so that they can consider it and think about what lessons can we learn from history. Now these things, these temples here, were probably what we would call an advertisement. If you ever watched advertisement, every product that comes along on the TV or radio or on the internet, this is the greatest cell phone that you can ever buy. It's worth $2,000. Or, man, if you buy this car, you'll be the coolest person ever. But just buy this car. You're going to be great. You'll look great in that car. So this is an advertisement to the gods, trying to tell them how great a person they are, and that when they die, that they should go into their version of heaven, and that they should be remembered. So this was built about 1400 to 1390 BC by a temple by Amenhotep. It's in a place called Solib, which is nowadays modern Sudan. Okay, this is another one. This is called the Tel Dan Stela, and it actually refers to David. There's a lot of people that in archaeological circles that claim there was never a King David. And in fact, there is right now, they don't have a direct reference to David while he was alive. But probably one of the main reasons for that is that, just a moment, the Muslim shrines, the Dome of the Rock and the few other mosques that they have there, they believe that most of that is sitting on top of the place of David's castle, or David's throne place. And so there are some people that are starting to see evidence that there actually was a David. So this one actually refers to David, or the house of David. And so they're talking about a particular king, which they don't know who it is. They have just part of the name in there, but it specifically says of the house of David. So they know David was the progenitor of this house of David. It's written in Aramaic. It was written in the middle of the 9th century, or around 1850. And it was found in the city of Dan in 1933. So again, here is a historical record by somebody other than an Israelite that says, here's this king, and he's of the house of David. And they treat it like fact. Okay. This is the, again, I'm not good with names, Memphita Stela. It's about 10 feet tall. It was found in 1896, found in Western Thebes in Egypt, and dates around to the year 1210. Of course, that's still during the time of the dates of the judges. And so it mentions that this particular king had come into contact with the people of Israel. And they actually called them Israelites. And so back at that time, they didn't have the concept of what we call fiction today, like write a fictional story, something like that. They'll take real life events and then they'll change them to make them look better. And so there's probably some description in here saying of how well they took care of the Israelites, and they came out on top of the Israelites. But the fact is that they are mentioning that the Israelites were a real country, a real people, and somebody that they interacted with about 1,200 years ago. Another proof that the Bible is actually knows what it's talking about. Okay, this is called the Moabite stone. It is written in the Moabite language, which is very close to what the Israelite. Black basalt stone, and it tells how Moab freed itself from Israel. Well, you can go to 2 Kings 3, and it reads almost the same. Of course, this stone says how great the Moabite God was in freeing them from Israel. But 2 Kings was kind of saying, hey guys, you messed up, and so you're going to lose Moab. So it was God telling the Israelites that they were going to lose because of their sins. And of course, Moab was going to write, says, yeah, our God helped us. But the real thing here is that, again, another culture, another event, several years different. Israel was there. Now, in this particular battle, King Jeroboam of Israel and Jehoshaphat of Judah were defeated by Mesa, king of Moab. And the stone also mentions that the God of Judah and Israel is Yahweh. Again, a reference to Yahweh, a reference to Judah, a reference to Israel, and it's treating them like real people, real events, and real gods. And so history is repeatedly showing that Israel was real, Judah was real, and that the belief in Yahweh was real also. And of course, we believe that Yahweh is real also.
Parallel to when King, the first and second Kings was written in time or different?
Yeah, this, I'm not sure absolutely when the book of Kings was written, but it's talking about the exact same event. And the people that can translate this has said that it's amazing how well they compare to one another. The events that happen, they both agree on the events, the people involved, when it happened, how it happened. Now, of course, the Moabite stone gives credit to their God. And of course, 2 Kings basically says, you guys are not following me or obeying me, so you're going to lose the country, the area of Moab. And so when they go and try to fight them, even though it's both Judah and Israel helping each other, they get defeated because God said so. And so we see that God is, or Yahweh is real to them, and that Israel and Judah is real to them. So this is real history, and this is going on in history, and it's true life.
So they acknowledge the existence of Yahweh.
Yeah, yeah. The Moabites. This is the Moabite stone, and the Moabites recognize Yahweh as the God of Judah and to some extent Israel. The Israelites did not totally go away from God. They just started worshiping Him in a different way than what God laid out. And so even when you get to the time of Jezebel, God mentions that says, hey, there's about 7,000 people that haven't bowed down to the God of Jezebel yet. So these are still my people. So God was recognizing that there were some people in Israel that still followed Him, even though the country didn't, the king didn't, and all of that kind of stuff. But God said, these are my people, that they have not bowed down to Baal. And so there were still people in Israel worshiping God. Now, how well they did it, don't know, but it seems like the basic narrative in 1st and 2nd Kings and Chronicles are basically that overall they did not follow God the way that he wanted them to.
Just the whole writings, the winners write the history.
Yeah. Well, in this case, what I think is what's good about the Bible is that here in 2 Kings, excuse me, 2 Kings, the losers are writing the history and they admit that they messed up because they weren't following God. And so I think that's a good indication that the Bible is true, because it never sugarcoats anything about what people do. If somebody did a good thing, they got credit for it. If they did a bad thing, they got credit for it. Look at David. David was called a man after God's own heart, but yet he had the affair with Bathsheba, and David and the kingdom suffered for that for the rest of David's reign because of that. And so the Bible is very fair. If you're doing good, God will give you credit for following him and being his follower. But if you're not following him, he will tell you, or tell you in the text, that this guy was not a follower of God, that he went off and did his own thing. So anyway, let's see. Okay. What time is it? I forgot to bring a time watch up.
You got 12 minutes.
12 minutes, okay. Okay, this is called the Black Obelisk of Salamaster III. This was made in 1827 BC in ancient Syria. It's about 6.5 feet tall, made of fine black limestone. And this is one of the interesting things. This whole obelisk, all 6.5 feet, shows a king of Israel, Jehu. Okay, Jehu is famous for killing who? Jezebel. He had her thrown out of the window, and they ran over her with a chariot. And when he got around to trying to pick up the pieces of her, only left, I think, part of her hands and a few other bones. So this is Jehu that kills off Jezebel. Well, this is a stone where he shows that evidently Jehu had to go and talk to Shalmaneser, the Assyrian king, and pay tribute to him. And so this is Jehu's retinue, and over on the far left is Shalmaneser, who is receiving the tribute. Now, if you look down, like the third figure from the left, there's a person laying down on the floor. That's Jehu, because he has to come in and he has to bow down to the king and show his submission to him. Here's a little bit closer view of it. And if you can see right down here at the bottom, there's Jehu there, and there's the king of Assyria there. And if you look at the fine clothes that the people behind Jehu have, and what the king have, and what the servants have, his is pretty plain. A lot of archaeologists believe that when Jehu had to go present his tribute to the king of Assyria, he had to actually disrobe down to what they would call their underwear. And so he had to be kind of show his submission and show that the king of Assyria had enough power to make him undress down to his underwear and pay homage to him. And so, and there are a lot of other stones and monuments that show other kings doing the exact same thing. And so the Assyrian kings were very powerful, and they forced people to pay a lot of tribute, a lot of countries to pay tribute. And this is Jehu. Now, this is the only picture that I know of a king of Israel. And so this is in the stone that they actually say, this is Jehu, king of Israel. So this was a real guy. He was subject to Assyria, and he paid tribute to him. And so it was, these guys are real, and what happened in the Old Testament is real. And there's a closer picture of Jehu, and now they kind of turned the picture, but this is actually, his face is to the ground, and where his nose is practically on the ground. Let's see, I'll do one more. One more, is that okay?
Yeah, you got 10 minutes.
Oh, I'm doing better than I thought. This is King Hazael. Refers to the Aramaic King Hazael. Now this was before Assyria really got up and running, up in what we would now kind of call Syria. Hazael was a fairly powerful king, and he's mentioned in 1 Kings 19 and 15. This stone was found in about 1903 in Syria at Tel Aphis, whatever. It dates to approximately 1800. It's about 24 inches tall and is in the Aramaic language, which, of course, Hazael is referred to in the Old Testament as being one of the major opponents to Israel and to Judah. And again, the Bible talks about them quite a bit. So again, we see that the Bible mentions real people in the real time frame and what their events are. This is a seal, or a copy of the seal. They found a real seal of this, and then the archaeologists made a copy of it so that they could show it to other people. Well, the original has been lost, but they still have this one, which is a duplicate. What they did is they took soft clay, they pressed the original in, then they cooked it, and then they poured soft clay and let it harden. So this is exactly what the signet or the seal was. And this is, the king or the person, dignitary, would usually wear it on his finger, and when he was supposed to make a command or authorize something, they would have a piece of paper there, and they would put some ink or some soot or something like on that, and then he would go up to the piece of paper and he would put his hand down there, the ring down there, and it would leave a symbol that looked like that to show the king has authorized this. Now also ministers had something like that, but it was very different. But if you saw this, you knew that the king himself had authorized that document. And whatever is in that document, you better obey it. So they believe that the original seal was from King Jeroboam II. King Jeroboam is mentioned in 2 Kings 13. The original was made in the 8th century of probably jasper, and it's about 1 inch by 1.5 inch. And as I said earlier, the original is now lost, but the replica is in a private collection. Ahab is real, because this isn't the seal, but this is the result of when Ahab put his hand onto a seal to authorize a document. Of course, Ahab is mentioned in 2 Kings and Isaiah, and it says, belonged to Ahaz, son of Jotham, king. Okay, maybe I got that wrong. King of Judah. Maybe it should have been Ahaz. Okay, the fingerprints can be seen on the left side, and they speculate that that may actually be a fingerprint of Ahaz himself. It's roughly 1/2 inch in size, and in a private collection. Let's see if I can get a few more. I'll try to get 2 more in here. This is a wall relief of the siege of Lachish. This is when Hezekiah was king and Assyria came to subdue Judah. And Assyria actually took everything except Jerusalem. And so the last major city that they took before they came to Jerusalem was Lachish. and they took it. It was about in 700 BC. It was found in about the 1850s. The original panel measured 62 feet in length and was nearly 9 feet tall. So this was an important thing for the Assyrians to put out, that they had taken Lachish. And this is recorded in 2 Kings 18 and 19. Now, this is also connected with the time that Assyria attacked Hezekiah, Judah, when Hezekiah was king. It talks about King Hezekiah and how the Assyrian king Sennacherib came and put Jerusalem under siege. Now, the interesting thing about the inscription, it says that the Assyrians talk about trapping Hezekiah in Jerusalem like a caged bird. Now, that's kind of an interesting term, because I can assure you that if the Assyrians had been able to take Jerusalem, they would have definitely told you that they had overcome Jerusalem and had destroyed it. But they were talking about, well, we had them caged up for a little bit. But the real reality is that God, by himself, not by the help of the Jews, destroys the Assyrian army. This now is in the Oriental Institute in Chicago. And so, let's see. Okay, so I think I'll end there. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Okay, thank you very much, and have a good evening.